When I first moved into the neighborhood, I thought I was stepping into a dream. The streets were lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, mailboxes stood evenly spaced, and every lawn looked like it had been cut with a ruler. It was the kind of place people imagined when they thought about peaceful suburban living. But with that picture-perfect appearance came something darker, an HOA that ruled with an iron fist. Like many homeowners, I tried my best to follow their endless rules. The grass had to be no taller than 3 inches. Trash bins couldn't be visible for more than 2 hours after pickup, and even the color of curtains seen from the street was regulated. I played along at first. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to enjoy my home. But then came the shed that I built it at the back of my property, tucked neatly behind my house, far from the view of anyone who didn't go out of their way to look. It wasn't flashy, just a small, functional structure where I could store tools, lawn equipment, and a few boxes that didn't fit inside the garage. It matched the color of my home, had a simple roof, and blended into the backyard perfectly, at least I thought so. The HOA president, a woman named Patricia, though most neighbors referred to her as Karen in a pantsuit, saw things differently. To her, my shed was not a simple utility structure. It was a violation, a blemish, a disgrace to the uniform aesthetic of the neighborhood. She showed up with printed bylaws in hand, claiming the shed was never approved by the board and had to be removed immediately at first. I thought it was a misunderstanding. After all, plenty of neighbors had small sheds or storage units tucked away in their yards. But Patricia had a different attitude toward me. She insisted my shed was larger, uglier, and in direct violation of neighborhood harmony. She began threatening daily fines until it was gone. The shed wasn't hurting anyone. But Patricia wasn't going to let it go. Every week, I received another notice, another letter taped to my door, another warning about further action. She even roped in a few board members, who suddenly started circling my property with clipboards like building inspectors. What Patricia didn't know was that I had a stubborn streak of my own. I wasn't about to tear down a perfectly good shed just to satisfy her obsession with control. And then, one evening while reviewing my property records, I stumbled across something that would change everything. A small detail, hidden in the paperwork, that would turn Patricia's crusade against me into her worst nightmare. The land behind my property stretched a little farther than I thought. In fact, it stretched right into a section the HOA had been using for years, a piece of land they believed was theirs. The very same piece of land where the HOA had built a small parking lot for community use. Except it wasn't theirs. It was mine. And if Patricia wanted a war over appearances, then I was about to give her one she would never forget. The shed was only the beginning. The parking lot would be the end. Patricia's letters became more aggressive. The fines weren't just threatened anymore. They were real. The HOA began issuing me daily charges, claiming that every day the shed remained was another offense. They added them up like a meter running out of control, hoping to pressure me into surrender. But while she was busy with paperwork, I was busy digging deeper into my property rights. The discovery wasn't a mistake. I had the legal documents, the county maps, and the survey reports to prove it. The land they had been using as a parking lot for years, neatly paved, striped, and presented as a community amenity, was not HOA property at all. It was part of the parcel I had purchased when I bought my house. Somehow, somewhere, the HOA had assumed ownership of something they had no claim to. I didn't bring it up immediately. Instead, I watched. I observed how much the community relied on that lot. Guests parked there during parties. Contractors parked there during home renovations, and even Patricia herself left her car there when her driveway was full. It was more than just a parking lot. It was the HOA's pride and convenience. Meanwhile, Patricia kept escalating. She showed up one morning with a contractor, pointing at my shed and loudly explaining how it was scheduled for removal. I intercepted them with my paperwork, showing proof that no such action could take place without my consent. Her face twisted with rage. She stormed off, vowing that the HOA would handle me properly. That was the moment I knew this was no longer about a shed. It was about power. Patricia needed control, and she couldn't stand that I was defying her. So I decided to bide my time and wait for the perfect opportunity to strike back. And when I did, it wouldn't just stop her campaign against me. It would expose her incompetence to the entire neighborhood. The more Patricia pressed, the more determined I became. My shed stood strong in my yard, untouched, while fines stacked up in the HOAS records. I ignored them, because soon, those fines wouldn't matter. I was preparing a move that would turn their precious parking lot into a battleground. With every letter from the HOA, I became more certain that the only way to end this was to strike back in a way Patricia couldn't ignore. So, I took my documents straight to a real estate attorney. The attorney flipped through the files, looked at the survey maps, and then leaned back in disbelief. The HOA had been squatting on my land for years. The parking lot, which they proudly listed in their newsletters as community property, was entirely mine. They had never purchased it, never leased it, and never even requested an easement. They had simply paved over it decades ago, assuming it belonged to them. The law was clear. I could reclaim it at any time. And that's when the idea formed. Instead of fighting them over the shed, I would fight them over the one thing they thought was untouchable, their precious parking lot. That I filed the paperwork to assert my ownership, recorded it officially, and had the boundaries remarked. New survey stakes went into the ground, drawing clear lines that cut right through the middle of their parking area. It wasn't just part of the lot that was mine. It was the entire thing. The next step was simple. I put up signs. Large, unmistakable signs declaring the area as private property. No parking without owner's consent. The reaction was immediate. Neighbors were confused. Guests were frustrated. But Patricia was furious. She stormed into my yard demanding answers, waving HOA bylaws in my face like they meant something here. But bylaws didn't change deeds. They didn't change county records. And they certainly didn't erase the fact that the land was mine. Patricia threatened legal action, but I was ready. The attorney had assured me I was on solid ground. The HOA had no rights to the property. They couldn't force me to keep it open. And so, for the first time, the HOA was powerless. Their endless fines and threats over my shed now seemed laughable compared to the fact that they had lost their entire parking lot overnight. But I wasn't finished yet, because simply closing it wasn't enough. I had plans for that land, plans that would make sure Patricia and her board never forgot the mistake they made by coming after me. Once the signs went up, the chaos began. For years, residents had relied on that parking lot for overflow. Family gatherings spilled into those spaces. Contractors filled them up during projects. Even delivery trucks used them to unload large items. Suddenly, with one move, all of that was gone. Cars lined the streets. Driveways overflowed. Neighbors began arguing with one another about where guests could park. And in the center of it all stood Patricia, red-faced and scrambling to explain how the HOA had lost control of what everyone assumed was theirs, but I didn't lift a finger. I didn't need to. Every inconvenience, every complaint, every frustrated neighbor pointed their anger not at me, but at her. She had been so focused on my shed that she had overlooked something as critical as confirming ownership of the lot. Patricia doubled down, of course. She called emergency HOA meetings. She sent out newsletters claiming I had illegally seized community property. But the more she ranted, the more I presented my paperwork. And the more paperwork I presented, the more her credibility crumbled that I even took it a step further. I had the lot gated and fenced. Overnight, what had once been a wide-open space became a locked, inaccessible patch of asphalt with private property, signs plastered all over it. The message was clear. If they wanted to harass me over a shed, I could take away something far more valuable. Neighbors started approaching me quietly. Some supported me, secretly tired of the HOA's constant control. Others were simply frustrated, begging me to reopen the lot. But I stood firm. This wasn't about convenience anymore. It was about teaching the HOA and Patricia especially that I wasn't someone they could push around. And while the neighborhood dealt with the fallout, my shed remained untouched. Weeks passed, and the HOA was unraveling. Without the parking lot, their events were a disaster. Holiday gatherings turned into traffic jams. Neighborhood meetings were half empty because guests couldn't find places to park. Contractors refused to work on certain houses without guaranteed space. Every problem circled back to Patricia. Her leadership, once unquestioned, was now under fire. Neighbors whispered about voting her out. Petitions circulated quietly. The same people who once nodded along to her crusades were now demanding answers. Patricia tried everything to regain control. She filed complaints with the city, but the city confirmed the land was mine. She attempted to rally the board against me, but half of them sided with me privately. And when she tried to fine me again, I laughed it off. What good were fines from an HOA that couldn't even keep its own parking lot? Meanwhile, I kept the lot locked up. The weeds began to sprout through cracks in the pavement. The once busy space grew quiet, abandoned, a daily reminder to the community of how far Patricia had fallen. And through it all, my shed stood proudly in my backyard, untouched, unbothered, still holding my tools and equipment, exactly as I had built it. But Patricia wasn't done yet. She was desperate, and desperate people make reckless moves. That Patricia's last stand came in the form of a lawsuit. She convinced the HOA board to file an official claim against me, demanding that I return the parking lot to community use. It was a laughable attempt, but one that dragged me into court, and court was where it ended for her. The judge looked over the deeds, the surveys, the maps, and the decades of negligence by the HOA. Within minutes, the case was dismissed in my favor. Not only was the land legally mine, but the HOA was ordered to cover my legal fees for wasting the court's time. When the ruling spread through the neighborhood, Patricia's reputation was finished. The board called for an emergency vote, and within weeks, she was removed as president. The woman who once lorded over every lawn and mailbox was suddenly powerless, a neighbor with no authority and no allies. As for me, I finally had peace. The shed stayed. The parking lot remained mine. And Patricia's reign of control was over. In the end, the war she started over a simple backyard shed had cost her everything: her credibility, her leadership, and her control over the neighborhood. And every time I walked past my locked gate, I smiled, knowing that the HOA president who tried to take my shed had lost her precious parking lot instead.